I am Scott Hill from Flight Club, a Wichita, Kansas spirits club. You can read about us, find out a little bit more about us, read some of our reviews at flightclubict.com. I am here tonight for another Flight Club Hangouts session where we get together with fellow Flight Club members and we sample some spirits, talk about things, debate a little bit, sort of the background behind the scenes of what goes on for our blog. I'm here with my fellow co-blogger on the club.
Hey, Steve Netherton over here in the little screen.
Now you're on the big screen. So
oh, good.
We are here today to talk about Wild Turkey's newest release, Longbranch. Just hit our shelves here in Wichita last week. We picked up the bottle and we thought we'd go ahead and get a sample it and get a review out. But I'm going to hand it over to Steve, let him talk a little bit about what Longbranch actually is.
Yeah, you've got Longbranch and I've got a little twig here. You got me a sample bottle. Yeah, so what is Longbranch? It's a new release for Wild Turkey. And Wild Turkey took it upon themselves, despite their history of really keeping everything in the family, and the family being the Russell family, extended an offer to none other than Matthew McConaughey to help them advertise this new release called Longbranch. We don't know if Matthew McConaughey is going to be more involved with additional releases later from Wild Turkey. We can only hope so. It will be interesting if he is. So the question now is, well, what is Longbranch, and is it any different from what Wild Turkey has out there in its product lineup anyway? In short, Longbranch is very different. Longbranch introduces something that Wild Turkey doesn't do and hasn't done, to my knowledge. One of the most distinctive characteristics of it is that it uses charcoal filtering, but actually uses two different methods of charcoal filtering. In addition to using charcoal filtering from charcoal made from white American oak, which is more typical, it also uses Texas mesquite charcoal for an additional filtration process. They say it's a two-step filtration to give it what Mr. McConaughey describes as a mellow softness, but while retaining the unmistakable Wild Turkey characteristics that we're used to. It's almost like a contradiction in terms. Wild Turkey is known for its kick. It's punchy. It's a high rye, it's spicy kind of bourbon. And so to say that it's going to take on a mellow characteristic, for anyone familiar with Wild Turkey, should raise eyebrows a little bit. As for the rest of the bourbon, from what we understand, it uses Wild Turkey's typical bourbon mash bill. So it's going to maintain that high rye mash that they're known for. How old is it? Well, we're not sure. The bottle itself doesn't say how old it is. The press release for this initial release of Longbranch this year says that it contains 8-year-old bourbon. Now, that means that somewhere in there's bourbon that's 8 years old, but that doesn't mean that it's all 8 years old in the bottle. There could be some that's a little bit older, although that seems doubtful if they wouldn't mention it. What that means is it's a blend, and some of that blend is 8 years old, and we don't know the age for the rest of the blend. Other than that, the proof is something that's a little bit different for Wild Turkey. Wild Turkey's got several different products of different proofs. They've got their 80, they've had their 81, their 101, and then their barrel strength releases. This one clocks in at a low proof. This is 86 proof. So for even Wild Turkey, that's a lower proof. Although if we want to talk about low proof entry for Wild Turkey going back in time, we can do that later. But to sum up, the specs on this, 86 proof, using a unique to Wild Turkey charcoal filtration method, featuring typical charcoal from white oak, and then this Texas mesquite charcoal, courtesy of Mr. McConaughey, to deliver something that's supposed to be soft and mellow, but unmistakably Wild Turkey.
Well, two things you mentioned that I think are very important. One, the lack of an age statement and how they refer to it in the press release. To me, not including it on the bottle and making it known in the press release that it is 8-year tells me that they're positioning themselves to lower that age over time. So if you're trying batch 1 here of Longbranch like we are, it may change here in the next few years as additional batches come out, see if they end up lowering the age of the blend down a little bit. We'll have to revisit this in a few years with a new release bottle at that point, see if we can, decipher anything. I don't think they're going to make a press release for every single release of it. So we'll see if we can pick that up over time. The second thing that I think is important is one thing that I've heard out there, which is incorrect, is this is essentially what Jack Daniels is doing, that they're essentially using the Lincoln County process. Stephen, can you speak to that, or do you know much about the Lincoln County process and how this differs from that process?
Well, the Lincoln County process uses charcoal filtration, but when they say they use charcoal filtration, I mean, they use it on a large scale. And so while you can use charcoal filtration differently, almost just in steeping charcoal in the distillate, what the Lincoln County process does is they put their distillate through a lot of charcoal, feet worth of charcoal to filter it through. And they do that between the time that they take it out of the still and before they put it in the barrel. So the question is here, how much charcoal is used? And then also, when were the charcoal filtration steps utilized? Were they taken after the distillate was taken off the still and before it was put in the barrel? Or did they filter it through the charcoal after it was taken out of the barrel and before they put it in the bottle?
Well, I've got to assume that this is a post-barreling filtration. Matthew McConaughey has not been involved for that many years. If this truly is part of his work, I had 8 years ago to utilize a Lincoln County process, whereas post-distillation, pre-barreling, I don't think that they planned that far ahead on this release. So I've got to think that this is post-barreling that they're doing that. And I actually looked up Jack Daniels today in their Lincoln County process, and they say it takes about 3 to 4 days for all of the distillate to filter through the maple charcoal, big vats, and it's a slow process, and that's why a lot of that picks up some of that. We think picks up some of that charcoal flavor because it spends so much time with that charcoal. Where here in the typical bourbon style charcoal filtration, which, and I'll ask you about in a minute, Stephen, is other companies are doing some sort of charcoal filtration as well. I don't think it's that 3 to 4 day process, but maybe here with Longbranch, maybe it is similar to that. Who else does charcoal filtration that you know of?
The one that comes to mind the most is Heaven Hill. So Heaven Hill doesn't do it with all their bourbons, but the ones they do it for, you'll see it right on the label. Even if you didn't really notice it before, once you look for it, you'll see it. One that is distilled at Heaven Hill, although the brand isn't put out by Heaven Hill, is Virgin Bourbon. It's a 7-year-old, 101 proof. It's charcoal filtered. Evan Williams is charcoal filtered.
Ezra Brooks, I believe, isn't it?
Yeah, that's another one, yes, that is charcoal filtered too. But then Heaven Hill does not charcoal filter their Elijah Craig, their Henry McKenna. And so for whatever reason, they're selective about that. But I can't think offhand of who else does. And as far as knowing who else does not, I know Buffalo Trace does not. Jim Beam, I always figured didn't, but I could be wrong.
But it's a little bit interesting because to some degree, all bourbon is charcoal filtered. It's in a charcoal burned out barrel. And if you've ever seen them dump a barrel, you see a whole lot of charcoal bits essentially coming out through. It's very minor charcoal filtration, but there's always some in there. So a little bit in everything, but yeah, Heaven Hill's the one I thought of that does it a lot more. And we'll see here what Wild Turkey's been able to accomplish. So should we get into it? Do you think anything else we need to talk about before we get into it?
I think I'm ready. Let's go ahead and do this. And I've not had this yet. This is my first time. I know you've tried this before, but I'm interested to see where this is going to go, because I've tried a lot of wild turkey, but yeah, this is going to be something different.
And I'm not shy that I'm a big wild turkey fan. Even their lower proof stuff, their 81 proof, for me, compared to other 80 proof stuff on the market, is pretty decent. Not something I want to drink every day, but especially their newer 81 proof versus some of their old 80 that wasn't very old. Their new 81 proof is essentially just proof down 101. So wild turkey does a nice job even when they're going lower proof.
And one thing I'm noticing now is something that I had always associated with wild turkeys, lower proof bottles, is a lot of them just kind of smell like cardboard, and maybe a little bit of sawdust, and then perhaps a trace of ethanol. While this is a lower proof, not quite as low as 80 and 81, obviously, I don't get any of that kind of cardboard. Instead, I'm really getting like some honey, maybe even some light, delicate baking spice, maybe like a nutmeg.
Yeah, I definitely get that as well. Toffee, it comes to mind. A little bit of vanilla, certainly there.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that vanilla, and then maybe it's not honey, maybe it's even just honeycomb. But that mellowness and softness that they put in the press release as being a goal here, at least on the nose, that definitely comes through. It doesn't have that bite on the nose that Wild Turkey 101 definitely has, that peppery kind of smell. But it's got a nice nose to it. It also doesn't smell like a lot of the really young bourbons do, where you have people say it smells green, or it smells like really young oak, or has that kind of cardboard smell. This does not, to me.
No, I definitely pick up some age in it. To me, that's a little bit coming across in that toffee. There's a little bit of maybe some dry oak in there. I get a little bit of like not quite bitter, not very pungent, but something like bitter orange peel. And to me, that it gives it an impression of having a little bit more age than the 81 does.
Yeah, you're right on the orange peel for sure. It also doesn't have kind of that charcoal or charred kind of smell that some of like the Jack Daniels kind of will have. Maybe more the Gentleman Jack would have. That's absent here. As far as whatever was imputed onto this from that charcoal filtration, for charred type of notes, doesn't really come through on the nose for me. Neither does some kind of Texas mesquite smokiness or anything like that.
No, that was my big fear with this, is that I'd feel like I'm out cooking on the grill on it, and that didn't sound very appetizing to me. And that's not present here. I don't really pick up much from the charcoal filtration. I don't get much of that charcoal. I don't get much smoke. It maybe's mellowed it a little bit, but it hasn't. What it hasn't done is taken away the nose. It hasn't taken away the flavor. I'm actually fairly surprised at how decent the nose is and how much flavor there is in the nose for something that's 86 proof. I know 86 proof isn't 80 proof, but you expect as you get lighter and lighter, and here in a moment maybe we'll talk about something like Basil Hayden, where you really start stripping away everything at that lower proof. I feel like you get quite a bit here.
Yeah, and I'm even picking up a little bit of like cantaloupe, a little bit of some light kind of melon sort of sense too, which is nice to have that fruity characteristic in there. That those kinds of fruits I don't usually get with wild turkey, but to come through here is nice. I like the nose.
It's not super complex, but it doesn't have to be. There's nothing really off-putting on there. I'm not offended by this by any means.
Yeah, it's a welcoming nose. I think for people that maybe aren't terribly familiar with bourbon, or are not the ones that seek out stuff that's high proof, this is going to be inviting. But even for people that are beyond bourbon novices, there's still something to appreciate here for sure. Yeah, it's not wildly complex, but it's nice.
I went ahead and took my first drink tonight, at least, of this. It's enjoyable. Some of the notes I get right away are very similar to the nose on the palate, but I get some of that vanilla. I definitely get some of the orange peel, kind of bitter orange peel. Not super bitter, not off-putting by any means, but some of that orange bitter there. Again, some of that toffee, maybe brown sugar, honey, some of those things that we talked about earlier.
I get some citrus notes too. And that it's not acidic though, in the way that, like if you were to have a ceviche or something. But I get some citrus in there, maybe some, if you were to just take like one of those little oranges, like the cuties, and just take the juice out of those, there's a little bit of that kind of flavor. And again, though, I'm not picking up on, I had some preconceived notions about this, hearing about the Texas mesquite, but do you get on the palate though, it's any kind of char or anything that you would ever describe as thinking, goodness, this was, distilled and aged next to a Texas campfire or something?
No, not at all. Not at all what I expected. And I've had, I think I've had a mesquite flavored bourbon of some sort, kind of a take on the Scotch, but with an American. It wasn't a bourbon, American whiskey profile. Very, very heavy mesquite. And I was afraid I was going to get that on this, and that's not what I get at all.
Yeah, I am getting a little bit of maybe you could say salty caramel at best. It's not smoke like on the back end of the palate, but it's something that leaves a little bit of a drying characteristic to it. I had anticipated something a little bit more oily maybe in texture. This isn't quite there. I wouldn't describe this as oily, but it's not super drying either. It's not, like a Lefroy or something really smoky. But you get a little bit of something that's drying, and like I said, maybe kind of some like salty caramel on the back end of the palate.
What it's a little bit reminding me of, and I get a lot of that citrus orange peel kind of flavor. If you've ever had a cocktail with a flamed orange, that's a little bit of what I'm getting on there. A little bit kind of that warm, the dryness, kind of that texture from an orange peel, and just a little bit of the dryness. Not super bitter, but a little bit of bitterness from the orange. It's not bad by any means, but there's a little bit of smoke kind of flavors there, but it's more of that kind of flamed orange flavor to me.
No, I think that's right on. Yeah. What do you think about the finish? It's got one for sure. I mean, there's something that lingers there. I'd call it maybe medium or close to even medium long. It carries over a lot of, I think, that kind of orange and that salty caramel, maybe a little bit of the toffee into the finish for me. But I'm trying to really pinpoint what is there on the final end of the finish.
If I were to get any smoke character at all, I would say it's kind of the very tail end of the finish. And maybe it's that I'm looking for it too much on this to try to find it. But there's a little bit of kind of a dryness that I associate with smoke there at the end. It's not bad. I wouldn't say that there's a lot of flavor in this finish. It's there, but it certainly isn't a roller coaster ride. It's not introducing a lot of anything new. It's pleasing. It makes you want to come back and drink some more, but it's not terribly complex on the finish.
Yeah, and it's not terribly complex throughout either. So it's at least consistent. But again, it hits some notes that are nice. There's nothing that really stands out and makes us disjointed or off-putting. But I don't know. I don't know if there's that uniqueness factor that you would have expected given how it's being promoted and even how the bottle describes it. It's more unique to Wild Turkey because, it does something a little bit different, sure. But in the larger context of, bourbon, what is this brand that's really unique? I'm not sure, other than Matthew McConaughey.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm getting a whole lot different than I might expect from an 8-year Wild Turkey product at 86 proof. Maybe it's tamed down a little bit. I know with Wild Turkey 101, even at 8-year, I've got some export 8-year 101. There's a lot of pepper to it. It's pretty warm. Turkey's always kind of a punch in the face. And you got to say maybe the charcoal filtration really did help mellow this. But at least the underlying flavors there of what I might expect from an 8-year Wild Turkey are under there. Some of the baking spice, some of the wood flavors. It's not classic Wild Turkey, dusty Wild Turkey kind of flavors, but sort of the modern tone of Wild Turkey. it's pretty much there. So I'd be curious on what this same product would really taste like at 86 proof, 8-year Wild Turkey that wasn't through the charcoal filtration. For my take, I probably would like it a little bit better, but I don't think that's who this product is designed really to cater to.
Yeah, and you had mentioned a little bit ago, Basil Hayden, but I'm interested to see what you think would be the nearest comp to this that's out there that people might be more familiar with.
Well, I've really struggled with that. I even went through my liquor cabinet to try to figure out who really are the competitors to this product. Basil Hayden's one that comes to mind because it's positioned as a premium low proof offering from Jim Beam. You can find it locally around here for $36, $40, sometimes up to $45. I hear the price was $45, kind of came down locally, and now I hear it's kind of going back up. So this is in the $35 to $40 range for a bottle. So it's pretty comparable to the 80 proof Basil Hayden. I would say that there's more to this than Basil Hayden. There's a little bit more flavor. I'd probably drink this over Basil Hayden. But Basil Hayden is your quintessential introduce someone to bourbon kind of product. But you get to 86 proof with this, so you're not far off of Buffalo Trace. The standard Buffalo Trace, which is anywhere from a 6 to 8 year blend. It's 90 proof, right around that range. That's probably what Buffalo Trace's comparable product is, and it's cheaper. And I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think that this was one that was meant to try and get people that were Jack Daniel's drinkers to try a Wild Turkey. And it's been a while since I was willing to drink Jack Daniel's neat. But if I can remember what that experience was like, even though I would have tried not to, I think this actually does kind of compare to Jack, but is certainly an improvement on it. I know that I've had it, but another Lincoln County process bourbon that it might be similar to is like George Dickel 12, where it's a lower proof. It does use the Lincoln County process, so there's a charcoal filtration method in there that does impart that kind of mellow or soft attribute that people will say. But not having had it that recently, I'm not sure how closely related it is. I don't know. Even though we were saying that it's not terribly unique, it's also hard to find something that really compares closely to it.
Yeah, standard Jack Daniel's is probably closer to that 4 years in age. Brown-Forman products have a lot of that banana flavor to them, along with that char you get out of Jack Daniel's. For me, even though I'm not a Jack Daniel's fan, I'm trying to look to this kind of neutrally. I think this runs circles around the standard Jack Daniel's, and I suppose could be a nice kind of segue from a Jack Daniel's drinker into a bourbon. But other than that, I guess it's maybe just kind of an introductory bourbon. I think a lot of people probably drink this over ice, that sort of thing, and I don't think they'd be offended by it by any means. But it is kind of pricey for that sort of product. You got to compare it to what Wild Turkey has themselves at their 81 proof. That's a 2.5% difference on alcohol. I can't imagine that Wild Turkey 81 sells very well. It's not a great product. It's intended for bartenders. I don't think that they're cannibalizing their own market for this product. This is better, but it is a lot more expensive.
It is a lot more expensive, but even then, again, if you take in the greater context of the bourbon market, this is a sub $40 bourbon. This was available locally for, was it 36 or 39?
Yeah, right around there.
Yeah.
I think maybe I got it for about 36.
And just the reality is that bourbon prices have been creeping up for the past couple of years. And to get anything that is new or special or limited is going to already command a premium. And yet for this to come under $40 is a little bit welcome change of pace from the releases that are coming out that are all, it seems to be over 50. So I think this actually delivers pretty well on its value for what it is, especially given the name that's attached to it and how it's been promoted. I could have seen them pricing it higher. I'm appreciative that they didn't, though.
So let's get into maybe some scoring on this. Here at Flight Club, we have a scoring system where we score the nose, the palate, the finish separately. We give an overall score to it that really doesn't take price into consideration, just takes our enjoyment into consideration. And then separately, we put a value score on it. So how would you score this one?
Well, yeah, we score it based on a 0 to 5 scale. 5 being highly satisfied, 0 being not satisfied at all, 3 being just satisfied with it. And so one approach I will take is to think about whether I liked the nose the best, or the palate the best, or the finish the best, and then go back and kind of assign a score to it. Here, it's hard for me to tell which of the 3 I like the best, frankly. But if I had to pick, I'd probably choose either the nose or the palate on this one for me. And then, I mean, if I had to select one of those 2, it'd actually kind of be the nose. I like the nose on this. It was inviting, like I said. And so I would put a 3 out of 5 on the nose. I thought it was satisfying. It didn't throw me off. At the same time, it really didn't have anything that wowed me. So I think a 3 on the nose for me. What about you on the nose?
That's pretty close to where I'm at as well. I'm satisfied with it. I can't imagine that I'm, overly satisfied. I'm not jumping to go to smell it again, but I'm not setting my glass away either. I think it's kind of defines what a 3 is on our score.
It's hard for me to assign something lower than that on the palate. Like I said, I felt like they were very close for me. And so it would be a 3 on the palate. I would say it's satisfying, but it's a little bit lower of a 3 score for me than the nose. Not enough to put it down to, maybe like a 2.5, down into the less than satisfied category. But I still would give it a 3.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all, and I really struggle even on the finish. I'm teetering on that 2.5 to 3 mark there on the finish as well. It's not not satisfactory, but it's probably its weakest link is probably the finish. Where would you put the finish?
I would put a 2.5, and here's why: is it didn't add anything that I didn't already get on the palate. And so it didn't offer me something else. And the thing that I was waiting for with the whole experience, even though I'm not sure I would have liked it if I got it, but still I was waiting for it because it's right there on the bottles. It says it's, this Texas mesquite charcoal filtering. And so I'm waiting for that on the nose. I don't get it, but I still think the nose is fine. I'm waiting for that on the palate, and I don't think I find it there either. So I'm like, okay, maybe on the finish I'm going to get some kind of Texas mesquite kind of smoky flavor in there somewhere. And because I still didn't, and like I said, there was a finish. It wasn't very long, but it was there, and it didn't add some other kind of attribute. I'm left a little bit less than satisfied on the finish, and so I'd give that a 2.5. Not to be harsh, but just to be honest.
Yeah, I won't disagree with that in any way. For me, you start compiling those scores, even though our overall score isn't necessarily mathematical. I'm hard pressed to say it's anything other than 3 satisfying. I wouldn't put it down at 2.5, but I certainly wouldn't give it a 3.5. So I'm right there at a solid 3 on the overall score.
On the overall, I do think it's satisfying. You do walk away from the experience as a whole feeling like, oh, okay, that was nice. And there isn't, some other glaring complaint there that you really just can't get away from. So I think 3's fair.
Yeah, I think so. And will I reach back for this bottle? I'm not sure if I reach back for this bottle on my own, but if I have friends over, I'm probably going to reach for this bottle and say, hey, you want to try Matthew McConaughey's new bourbon? And I imagine, I'll find a bottom of this bottle sooner than I will in many of my bottles for that reason.
What do you think about the value score?
I'm really struggling with that one. $35. I do hear you on sort of the new wave of pricing on bourbon. I think prices are going up, especially on new releases. You don't see a lot of new releases coming out on the lower price points. They're starting to fill in as you raising up those prices a little bit. I don't think it's priced wrong by any means, especially right now when they're talking about it containing or being an 8-year or around that period of time bourbon. I don't think it's priced wrong. I would like to see it come in maybe around that $30 range. I'm struggling again, probably between that 2.5, 3. I'm probably leaning more to 2.5 on value, but I could be persuaded one way or the other on that.
Yeah, I think I would persuade you, if I wanted to, more towards the 2.5, because first you can compare it to other brands that are in that price range. This is just a couple dollars cheaper than Four Roses Single Barrel, which runs circles around this. But also, it is nearly $15 more than Wild Turkey 101, which is kind of a standard bearer. Wild Turkey 101 is terrific. It's very, very good. And so even within its own brand, it's a little bit hard to justify it being priced quite up at that point. In the end, though, you're still talking about a few dollars. It's not as if this is twice as much, and you're talking $10 or $20 difference between where it is and where you think it should be, which is why I would put it more as like the 2.5 instead of lower. But I don't think it's quite deserving of a 3.
Don't disagree with that at all. And I'll put one more question to you now that we've kind of got some scores out of the way, and I think I know kind of where you think that this falls. If we can agree that this is intended as kind of an introductory bourbon, where do you think it fits within that product class?
The product class of introductory bourbons.
Yes.
across different brands.
Yeah. You got your Basil Hayden. You've got ones we talked about, Wild Turkey 81, maybe even Buffalo Trace, if you want to put it sort of in that introductory bourbon, a little bit lower proof. Where would this fall for you?
I would utilize this more as kind of a wild card. Here's what I would do with it: is if you've got somebody that's only associated whiskey or even bourbon with something like Jack Daniels. We unfortunately know such a person. And when you're trying to get them to get out of their comfort zone and try something else, you can say, hey, guess what? This is a product that also does a charcoal filtration system. It's a lower proof. If you can try this, then you'll see that it's inoffensive. You might even like it, and then continue to work through some of Wild Turkey's other stuff, and you've got them. Here's also how I would use it: is the people that like to hate on charcoal filtration because they hate anything associated with Jack Daniels in more of a snobbery way. You would say, look, here's something that does the charcoal filtration, and can't you see that it actually doesn't impart as much as you think it does? You could do the same with some of those Heaven Hill products we mentioned before. And then you use that as almost a rebuttal to them to say, come on, let's bring it back. Let's not be quite so critical and quite so extreme. So I would kind of use it more in that sense than anything else.
I think that's fair, and I think we're going to have to test that theory out of yours one of these days and put that person who I think we both know we're talking about to the test and see if we can convince him. So
yeah, what I think is maybe the more poignant question here is if Wild Turkey Longbranch is one of Matthew McConaughey's movies, which one is it?
You got me stumped on that one.
Well, I've got his IMDb pulled up, so let me give you some options. Because I've thought about this, and I know what the right answer is, but I can let you try to come to your own conclusions. So I'm not going to go through his whole IMDb because Matthew McConaughey's been a busy man, and I didn't really realize that until I looked through these. But here are your options: Interstellar, The Wolf of Wall Street, Dallas Buyers Club, Magic Mike. Let's scroll down a little bit further here. The Lincoln Lawyer, and I'm even trimming these down. Let's see. How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days or The Wedding Planner.
Well,
which one of those movies is Longbranch?
I'm going to go off your list. I'm going to go with Dazed and Confused, and he keeps getting older, and this stays the same age. That's what I'm going to go with. But I'll see. I'll take your answer.
Well played. It makes sense that you would do that movie because you're significantly older than I am.
Ouch.
Here's what I think is the right answer, and it's How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. Here's why. Though I've never seen this movie, I don't need to. I know enough about what it's about. Kate Hudson is out to prove that she can get Matthew McConaughey to hate her. Okay? And she's going to do whatever she's got to do to make that happen. Well, here's the thing, is Wild Turkey said, listen, here's what we're going to do. We are going to take Wild Turkey and we're going to proof it way down to 86. People are going to hate that. And then what we're going to do is we are going to charcoal filter it, not once, but twice. And then we are going to charge nearly twice as much as we do for Wild Turkey 101 and put this out there. And we're going to make people hate it with all these different attributes. But then they come back around and say, but the reason they won't and the reason that they can't say that they hate it at the end of the day is because Matthew McConaughey is still just too charming and he wins her over. So that's why it's How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days.
I think that's a winner right there.
I thought so too.
So we clearly have nothing substantive left to talk about as it relates to Longbranch. So I think that's probably a point in time where we better cut this off, quit this, and tell people that they need to go read the full review when it comes out over on our blog, flightclubict.com. We'll put a link in the YouTube video if you're not already there. So go enjoy that. I'll sign off. Steve, thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Cheers.
All right.